Therefore, let's go ahead and take our normal few moments of silence to make sure that you're ready to study. Let us pray. Heavenly Father, we ask you now that you give us everything necessary for a proper study, including self-discipline, concentration, genuine humility, and anything else we might need. And we pray in Christ's name. Amen. All right, verse 6. It makes it a little bit with those bright lights. It makes it a little bit. Does it come off on the camera okay? Is that why the lights were out, or it's coming out good? Can you guys all see the screen? Maybe I need to do different colors for the next time. Oh, that's right. You have the slides, yeah. And you guys can see it okay? The yellow is not. Well, we put new lights up in here too. If you want to give it a shot, it's up to you guys. I can see it. Okay. Okay. So start off. We're going to go ahead and exegete verses 7 and 8. Yeah, that helped a little bit. Verse 7 starts off, and if, which we'd expect, and if he rescued. That's weird. It's not doing the doink, 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 but okay, you get it all at once. Okay, so we start this verse, of course, with the expected conjunction kai, meaning and that continues the process of the first class conditional sentence. And so we also have the elliptical if that gives us the idea of the continuation of this process. Then we have the elliptical insertion, that's the elliptical insertion of if. Next in the Greek, we have the emphatic phrase, which we skipped. What am I doing here? Oh, next in the Greek, we have an emphatic phrase, which we will skip. There we go. And put it to the right place, okay? So we skip that, and instead we go to this aorist indicative third person singular of the deponent verb haruomai. H-R-U-O-M-A-I, haruomai. In this is a deponent verb, meaning that it's middle in form, but it's actually active in action. So it means to rescue from danger, to save, to deliver, or to preserve. And especially to preserve something or someone from something. And that's Bauer, Dank, Arndt, and Gingrich, page 908. Here, the indicative mood tells us that this was a reality. And the third person singular gives us the he. And this is obviously a reference to theos, or God, all the way back in verse 4. So this tells us that God was responsible for the rescue. Next, we have the emphatic piece that we skipped, and it's righteous Lot. And I added there in brackets, you don't have to put it in yours if you don't want to, but I have it in brackets there that what we're talking about righteous here is possessing plus R. Okay, so righteous Lot, slant, possessing plus R, and that's underlined, comma. And this is the emphatic phrase that we skipped. We start with the masculine accusative of the adjective that you would expect, dikaios, D-I-K-A-I-O-S, dikaios. And this means, quote, being in accordance with high standards of rectitude, just, fair, or righteous, end quote. And that's BDAG, page 236. And then it's extended in our literature to mean either possessing human righteousness as minus R, or possessing God's righteousness as plus R. And with very few exceptions, it's talking about possessing God's righteousness as plus R. So the context here is, in our context, the idea is possessing God's righteousness. And note that this definition is very important, and it'll be made clear in the accompanying analysis, but the idea is that we're talking about the fact that Lot was a believer. That's what we mean by righteous. It doesn't mean that he was functioning properly as a believer. This is status and not operation. And that's why I wanted to point out back when we were talking about Noah, Noah was preaching righteousness. Noah was functioning properly. That's why you have that phrase, where here we have righteous Lot. And we're going to get the phrase righteous 3 times in our exegesis of these 2 verses. And Peter is using this somewhat sarcastically, right? Because he's talking about righteous Lot. He's a believer, but he's not functioning like a believer, okay? So the adjective is then followed by the masculine accusative singular of the proper noun, Lot. So in the Greek, his name is really Lot, L long O-T. And of course, we transliterate that to Lot, who is the nephew of Abraham. Then we have, while being tormented, slant, worn out, slant, and then in parents 2 lines through it, exhausted and overcome. When I've been trying to not do all of these slants, if you recall, towards the end, Jack was slanting everything, and you got to the point where you couldn't read the verse, right? And so I know it gets hard to read the verse to do this. So if I can legitimately pick the best word for this, I will. But here we have the idea that it actually includes all of these, because you can be tormented without being worn out, right? And you can be worn out without being tormented. Okay, and so you have torn out, or worn out, and of course that means exhausted and overcome. And here we have the present middle participle, masculine accusative singular of the verb kataponeo, kataponeo, K-A-T-A-P-O-N, short E, long O, kataponeo. And this verb means to cause distress through oppressive means, to torment, to wear out, or simply oppress. It's extended to include the concept of wearing out by means of exhaustion and overcoming. And again, because I can't single out a specific idea in context, I've included the full meaning here, including the parenthetical idea of exhaustion and overcoming. The participle turns this verb into an adverb, giving information to the verb of the rescuing. So it tells us how the rescuing was done, or the condition under which the rescuing was done. The middle voice is reflexive and tells us that Lot is causing this action as well as receiving it. So in many of the English translations, and I'll go here to the New American Standard, which it didn't have written down right there. And the New American Standard, they have translated it as, and if he rescued righteous Lot, oppressed by the sensual conduct of unprincipled men. Well, anyway, I was thinking of verse 8. Sorry about that. But the idea here, though, is that it is reflexive, meaning that this wearing out, Lot is receiving this and doing this. He's doing it to himself. Okay, that's what reflexive means. Reflexive means like, shoot myself as opposed to shoot someone or have someone shoot me. Okay. So we have while being tormented, slant, worn out, slant, exhausted. And then we have by means of the sensual conduct of the lawless ones. And here I have in brackets minus the LDE, in other words, ones who are not functioning under the laws of divine establishment. And I'll explain why I have that. But by means of the sensual conduct of the lawless ones. This phrase starts with the preposition in plus the dative. And the basic meaning of in is in, inside of, or within. We see it all the time. But here in the dative, and we usually see it in the genitive, here in the dative, it's a dative denoting means or the manner in which something is accomplished. So many times it's included, it's translated as with, like I took the shovel with me to dig the hole, right? You don't say I took the shovel in me to dig the hole, okay? Or the hole was dug by means of the shovel, and that's what we have here. We have by means of. It tells us the manner in which something is accomplished. So we have by means of, and that's just from in. Then this is followed by a kind of a form of speech. We start with the feminine dative singular. We knew it was going to be dative because the preposition was in the dative. We have the feminine dative singular of the articular noun aselgeia. And that's Aselgeia. Aselgeia. And selgeia actually means to have self-constraint. So aselgeia, or to be lawful. Aselgeia means, quote, a lack of self-constraint, which involves one in conduct that violates all bounds of what is socially acceptable. End quote. That's Bauer, Dangering, Arndt, and Denker. It really is BDAG. It's not B, and it's not for years and years. I'm trying to get used to it. For years and years, it was always, Jack always said, Bauer, Arndt, Gingrich, and Denker. And that's the way I always related to it. But I'm looking at it and I go, you know what? Every piece of software that I buy says BDAG. And then I actually looked at the inside of the book because I was always using I actually looked at the title page of the book, and it's written by Bauer, edited by Denker, and then it has Arndt and Gingrich. So it really is BDAG. Anyway, page 141. And then it comes to me, and then it also means behavior completely lacking in moral restraint, with the implication of sexual licentiousness. And that's in Leonidas Greek English Lexicon, number 88.272. And I give you those references because I'm not making it up, right? I give you references so you understand and have confidence at what you're getting, okay? Now, so what this does, this gives us the sensual licentiousness part of it, the central part of it, and then we have the feminine genitive singular of the articular noun anastrophe, A-N-A-S-T-R-O-P-H long E, anastrophe. And anastrophe we've seen before, and it means a way of life, modus operandi, conduct of behavior, that type of thing. So with the genitive, it's of the conduct. So literally we have by means of sensual licentiousness of the conduct. Okay? So by means of sexual licentiousness of the conduct. And obviously that's best translated in English, by means of sensual conduct. So means of the sensual conduct. Then we have the last phrase. It starts with the masculine genitive plural of the article, ha, which gives us thus, the, plus the masculine genitive plural. You'd expect that because I said we had masculine genitive plural article, plus the masculine genitive plural of the adjective athesmos, A-T-H-E-S-M-O-S, athesmos. So we have ha athesmos. Note there's no noun there. You have the article and you have an adjective. Well, the adjective is substantive, right? And that's always how we get the ones, right? And athesmos is actually a Koine slurring of the Attic Greek word athesmois. That's M-O-I-S. And athesmois in turn is the combination of the alpha primitive negative a, which gives us not, plus the Attic Greek word thesmois. And thesmois means fixed, settled, or lawful. And that's in Liddell and Scott's Greek English lexicon. And Liddell and Scott is a classic lexicon that talks mostly about classical Greek, Greek from individuals like Sophocles and things like that. So when you add the "a" to it, athesmois means not lawful or lawless. And then in the Koine, the word slurs, remember the normal day-to-day language that tends to take things that were very articular and precise in pristine languages and turns them, kind of slurs them and turns them in. It's sort of like, like what's happened with Ebonics, right? They slur everything, right? So the idea is that athesmois becomes athesmos, or lawless, and the adjective's used as a substantive, and in the plural we have the lawless ones. And we're going to get lawless twice. And so here we need to understand. So in context, we're referring to lawless ones as those individuals, both believer and non-unbeliever, who are not following the laws of divine establishment, as denoted by their conduct violating what's socially acceptable. See, that's different than when we get to verse 8. We're going to have lawless again, but it's going to be associated with divine law. Okay, so then we're talking about believers, and we're talking about violating God's laws, as opposed to the law. The laws of divine establishment are God's laws, but here what I'm saying is we're talking about believer and unbeliever, right? The sentence has no punctuation at the end, since it continues with an ellipsis in verse 8. Little by little.
15 minutes.
I'm going to pause for just a second to allow her to get wired up, okay, to come into the streaming. So we can do that. We're small enough. We can give her that kind of courtesy. But altogether, we'll hit that. Altogether, we have, and if he rescued righteous Lot, slant possessing plus R, while being tormented, slant worn out, slant exhausted and overcome, by means of the sensual conduct of the lawless ones. In other words, what's happening is he's getting overcome because he's seeing all of this stuff going around him, right? And you can imagine, because like we'll find out here, he's not a properly functioning individual. I'm not going to go into a super autobiography like I did of Noah. I might, but we are going to get some recounting of Genesis 18 and 19, okay? And we're going to see the fact that Lot was not functioning properly. And so you can imagine that he's an individual who's allowing this, rather than dogmatically saying, this is not going to affect me. It's not, it's something I don't want to have anything to do with, right? I'm going to put it in God's hands and move forward. And I'm going to try and evangelize these individuals, and give them the opportunity. No. What you get from here, the fact that he's being worn down, and the fact that he's allowing himself to be overcome and exhausted, is because he's kind of standing on the precipice. He kind of wants to do this stuff, right? He's having that mental turmoil of, I wonder if I could get away with that. I wonder if I could do this. All right, no, I need to, I need to be a believer. I need to function properly. I need to set an example. But boy, that sure looks like fun, right? I mean, that wears on your soul. Whatever your area of weakness is, right? One of the things your area of weakness does, remember, we all have an area of strength and an area of weakness. Whatever the area of weakness is, Satan figures it out pretty quickly because of your behaviors. Satan can't see your soul. He's not God, but he can certainly play the averages, and he can see the things that you malfunction at all the time. And he's going to keep throwing those things at you. Hey, is this going to stick? Is this going to stick? Is this going to stick? Right? And it's wearing with you. If you aren't rebounding it, if you aren't putting it in God's hands and moving forward, if you aren't saying, no, I'm not going to do this, and make that statement dogmatic, then you're going to continue to get it thrown at you. Right? Jack used to talk about, his old sin nature being Irish. His old sin nature was wanting to drink, and then after he got drunk, he wanted to fight. Right? He used to talk about spending, lots of time in the brig in the Navy, and I could certainly see that, right, with Jack. As big as he was, and as with all of his black belt and judo and all that, everything else, you can imagine that he would, can handle himself really well. Okay. And so when he became a pastor, he said, I'm not going to drink. I have made that decision. I would rather fight than drink. I will never drink again. And he used to say, it's not because there's prohibition in the Bible against drinking, because there's not. He goes, I just won't drink because I can't handle it. I know what it does to me, so I've already made the decision. And I'm not going to be one of those kind of alcoholics that hides the bottle for the just in case situations, right? Well, I'm not going to drink anymore, but I'm going to put this here, and I'm going to put it here to remind me not to drink. No, you're putting it there so that when you fall off the wagon, you can go have a slug, right? Well, that wears you out. That kind of, if you haven't made that decision, that wears you out. And so what we have here is we have Lot getting to the point of exhaustion because he's having to mentally play this game all the time of trying to keep himself out of trouble. Okay? So that's what we have in verse 7. And if he rescued righteous Lot, of course he did, while being tormented, worn out, exhausted and overcome by means of the sensual conduct of the lawless ones, and these are ones who are not functioning properly. They are malfunctioning, reversionistic unbelievers as well as reversionistic believers. And then we're going on into verse 8, because verse 8 is a parenthetical section that gives us more information about Lot. Okay? And we start off by open parent. And in your English, you'll see an open parent as well. In your translation, I bet almost every one. So it's not hidden. Open parent, for you see, comma, by the act of seeing and by the act of hearing. So Lot is seeing all this going around him. He's hearing all of this thing going around him. People hooking up and, all of these things going on. It's just wearing on him, right? So we know this is a parenthetical section because of the form of speech. This section starts with the explanatory clause, as we have for you see, which is totally separate from the protasis form that's been being used. See, in all of the other verses, we start off with what? We start off with and if. Here we don't have and if, we have for you see. Therefore, it's actually an explanation of the condition of Lot, and it's separate from his use as an example. And because this section has no contextual or grammatical tie to the conditional sentence or the phrase that precedes it, nor to the phrase that follows it, we actually know that it's parenthetical. In other words, there's no equivalent of saying open parent here. You just know that it's parenthetical because it doesn't fit, right? It doesn't fit the pattern. It doesn't have a predecessor or a successor, right? And there's a good description of this grammatical approach given to us in A.T. Robertson's Grammar of the New Testament, pages 433 through 435, under the topic of parentheses. And actually, our verse in that section is used as an example. Okay? So we therefore start this with a parent, and then we have the parenthetical post-positive, or we have the post-positive conjunction gar. Oops, I'm sorry. Should have given it to you. We have the post-positive conjunction gar giving us for you see. Next, we have the neuter dative singular of the noun blemma. B-L-E-M-M-A, blemma. And blemma is actually a cognate of blepo. See, blemma is the noun, blepo is the verb, and blepo means to see. And so therefore our noun means the act of seeing. And the dative case gives us the head word by, so we have by the act of seeing. That's how it all goes together, right? Then, as you'd expect, we have the conjunction kai, giving us and. And then we have the feminine dative singular of the noun akae. Akae. Sounds like it should be Hawaiian. Dum 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 dum. Akae. Anyway, AK short O long E. Okay. And a ka-e is a cognate of the verb akuo. A-K-O-U long O. Akuo. Anyway, going out of my Hawaiian. Sorry about that. And we've seen akuo before. Akuo means to hear. And so it's the verb meaning to hear. Therefore, the noun means the act of hearing. And many times it's translated as simply as listening. But I wanted to go ahead and keep that parallel grammatic structure. So I have the act of seeing and the act of hearing. Now, I could have said by the act of seeing and listening, but it doesn't have the same poetical kind of sound. So we have by the act of seeing and by the act of hearing. So I use that same phraseology for parallelism. And then we have a comma. I don't know why I must have accidentally changed my animations so that they just come out as one chunk as opposed to each individual line like I normally do. Then we have the next phrase, the righteous man. And again, I put something in brackets to remind us what righteous here means. It simply means born again Lot. Okay? And this is and I told you you're going to get righteous 3 times, and this is the second time. This is the masculine nominative singular, once again, of the adjective dikaios. And we just saw it in the previous verse. And it means being in accordance with the high standards of rectitude, ... And it comes to mean plus R. And as stated before, this definition is very important because it tells us that he is righteous, he is a born again. But it's used as a substantive. And with the article, we have the righteous man. Okay, so we have the righteous man. Now, again, this has nothing to do with his function. This is completely his status. If Hitler had become a believer, okay, and still did the things that Hitler did, you could call him righteous with this definition. Now, when we're in Proverbs, when we talk about a righteous man, Solomon is very clear about it is about function. It's about someone who's a believer who's functioning properly. That's righteous. But here, the way Peter's using it, because of what we know about Lot, he's using it just as being a believer, not being a properly functioning believer. He's contrasting him, and he's doing it in a somewhat sarcastic fashion to Noah, right? It's like when you have a believer who malfunctions, that you see malfunction, you can say, boy, aren't you righteous? Right? Well, yeah, I am. I'm a believer. Yeah, it's not the point. Okay. So next, then we have while dwelling / making his home among them. Now, I want you to notice the difference here between the corrected translation and what most English Bibles say. For example, the New American Standard says, "For by what he saw and heard, that righteous man, while living among them." We're not talking about simply living among them. We're talking about, there's a difference. We're talking about, dwelling, but making his home among them. You can live somewhere because you have no place else to go, right? But here, he has chosen this area, as we'll see when we talk about Genesis chapter 19 or 18, or actually 17. But anyway, when we give a little bit of information about Lot, he chose this place. He's living there, and he's making it his home. Despite everything that he sees around him, he could leave. He doesn't. He's making it his home. Okay? So here we start with the present active participle, masculine nominative singular. We knew it was a participle, that's why we have the ing word. Masculine nominative singular of the verb egatoikeo. Egatoikeo. E-G-K-A-T-O-I, K short E long O. Engatoikeo. Really, I should have done the N. GK is like a GG. It gives you kind of the NG sound in the English. So it's really engatoikeo. And it means to live as a resident but in the present active, which is what we have here, it carries the active connotation of not just dwelling or residing, but actually making your home in a location to build a dwelling and to assimilate. See, nobody goes to a place and says, ooh, I want to move here and completely disregard everybody around me. Okay. Ooh, I want to live there and have absolutely nothing to do with anybody around me. Most normal people don't, right? You'd be considered to be, a recluse or a curmudgeon or something like that, right? So he moved there to assimilate there. And as we'll see, he actually moved there because he was malfunctioning and he was selfish. And he allowed money and greed to get him. Okay? So the participle, of course, is an adverbial participle that is modifying the verb, so it's which is the verb or verbal idea which is coming up. And of course, it gives us an indication of time. It says while dwelling, making a home there. Okay. Next, we have the preposition plus the dative. Once again, in, with, by, to, or among. When you have in, the idea is in the crowd of or among. So here the idea is among. And since it's in the dative, what we expect is what we get. We get a masculine dative plural of the third person personal pronoun autos. And we know that autos basically means self or same. And then it's extended to be the third person pronoun he, she, it, they, or them. And in the plural, we have them. While dwelling, making his home among them. Notice it's not on the fringe of them, okay? It's not around them, meaning kind of close, but, just nearby. He's living in the burbs, okay? The idea is he's in the city. He's among them, okay? All of these things are hints, and Peter does an extremely good job of doing this, and it just doesn't come out in the English, right? In the English, what we have is for by what he saw and heard, that righteous man, and they have righteous underlined here, that righteous man, while living among them, felt his righteous soul tormented day after day while with their lawless deeds. So I'm going to tell you here, this idea felt his righteous soul tormented day after day. The idea makes you believe that he's this righteous guy like Noah was. He's functioning properly. He's in the middle of this, and he's getting this piled on him, and he's feeling this, and oh man, this is just weighing me down. No. Well, when we get here in a second, he's causing it. That's what they don't get in the English. So that's our next phrase. Kept on torturing his righteous soul. He kept on torturing, right? That's the implied noun. I could have put it in parens. I guess maybe I should have. I didn't. While dwelling, making his home among them, kept on torturing his righteous soul. There's no other noun there, so the idea is him. Okay? And we have here the imperfect active verb, and it's a third person singular, which is the him. Okay? And the verb is basanidzo, B-A-S-A-N-I-D-Z, long O, basanidzo. Again, sounds kind of Spanish, expect to hear claves, tonk, 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 bossa nova. Anyway, basanidzo. The verb means to subject to punitive judicial procedure. Punitive, that's the key. It means to torture, to torment or harass, to subject to severe distress. That's BDAG, page 168. And we have to note, see, this is what they miss, see? This is the imperfect active indicative, okay? It's not the passive. It says that he's doing it, right? So the NAS, which I have here, the NASB, says felt his righteous soul tormented. That would have been in the passive or the middle. where the action is received by the noun. Here, the active, we have the noun Lot performing this action. He's causing this torture by being where he can see and hear this malfunction all around him. It's like when you go to the doctor and you say, Doc, it hurts when I do this, right? That's a classic joke. It hurts when I do this. What's the doctor say? Don't do that. Right? Yeah, no. Well, if he's got all this angst going on, there's two things he can do. One is function properly, evangelize, and try and get the people to understand their malfunction. Or two, move away. But he's not moving away because he has all kinds of potential business and money there. Right? Yeah, it's the old joke about the blonde woman. See, I can say this, my wife is blonde, right? And she lets me tell blonde jokes, right? This blonde girl goes to the doctor, and the doctor says, "So where's it hurt?" And she goes, "Here, ow, and here, ow, and here, ow, and here, ow." And he looks at her, and goes, "You've got a broken finger." Never mind. Okay. So he's causing the torture by being where he can see and hear this malfunction. And perfect tells us that this action that's not complete. In other words, it's continuing. So that's why we have the kept on torturing. And then once again, we have the feminine accusative plural of dikaios, meaning righteous. And it's modifying. In this case, it's actually an adjective. Again, it's a accusative, feminine accusative adjective. And it's modifying the noun psuche. P-S-U-C-H, long E, which we call psyche in the English, usually, but it's psuche, and it means soul, or the immaterial existence of the human.
Did you say that adjective was plural?
Feminine accusative singular. Yeah, otherwise it'd be souls. Yeah. Righteous soul. The noun is the same thing. It's a feminine accusative singular. Thank you. Good question. If I said it, which I may very well could have, I was wrong. Okay. We don't have any punctuation yet. So we have kept on torturing his soul day after day. This is a pretty simple phrase. It's the feminine accusative singular of the noun hemera, H long E M-E-R-A, hemera. And hemera, we've seen many times before, means day. In fact, we've got a category associated with day. Okay. And the use of day, there's many different types of days in the Bible. Okay. And it's followed by the preposition ek, E-K, ek. And ek usually means out of, or from. And the idea here is if you're talking about out from, you're talking about following something, and therefore you're talking about after. So it's extended to mean after. And then it's followed by the feminine genitive singular of the noun hemera. So the first one's feminine accusative, the second one's feminine genitive. And so we would have day after of the day, but it comes out as English as day after day. So kept on torturing his righteous soul day after day. Then we have the final phrase in the parenthesis. We have, by means of their unlawful / anti-divine actions. Close parent comma. So now, the reason I had the one situation is that this phrase here starts with the neuter dative plural of the adjective onamos. And we've seen nomos before, meaning law, and onamos includes the prefix of the alpha primitive negative, a. So onamos does mean unlawful. Okay, and this is different from the lawless word that we saw in verse 7, remember, which was athesmos. And there's reasons that there's two different words. Word deals with the laws of divine fixed laws. See, it comes from which meant fixed laws. Laws is so established by quote unquote society, which we understand are divine, really, but they're the norms that are used by a believer and unbeliever. Okay, as opposed to the laws of God, which are at least be followed by believers. So he's telling us that there's believers in this city that are doing this as well. Okay? And so here we're talking about being against the actual source of the laws of God or the divine laws. This includes those laws required of the believer in addition to those laws required of all mankind. So it's a greater set, right? You have the onamos, which is this big set, okay, includes the divine as well as laws of divine establishment. I'm talking about, remember, Christ fulfilled the Mosaic law and leave us lawless. We have the as we go through communion, we have the perfect law. We have the righteousness. We have all of these things, the royal family honor code, right? All of that's in the big circle, right? Doing a Venn diagram here with my arms, right? And then you have a smaller subset, which are the laws of divine establishment. That's what the athesmos was talking about. Okay, so it's a dative of means again. So we have by means of, and it was a neuter dative plural, so it gives us their. So we have by means of their unlawful slant anti-divine law. Okay. And then we have the neuter dative plural of the noun ergon. And ergon means work, right? That's in English, we use it to mean work. We have an erg in physics, ERG in physics is a measure of work. Okay. We have ergonomics, which means something that helps you do work better. Okay. Anyway, the other, but it also comes to mean, it's extended to mean the act of work or actions in deeds. That's where we get, believe it or not, that's where we get our English word urge, right? If you have an urge to do something, you have the idea of doing some work, doing something, right? Oh, I've got an urge for that, right? And so then we close the parenthesis and we have the comma. So all together, verse 8 says, for you see by the act of seeing and by the act of hearing that righteous man, born again Lot, while dwelling slant making his home among them, kept on torturing his righteous soul day after day by means of their unlawful slant divine law, anti-divine law actions. And you want that, I can understand why the English guys tried to do what they did. They didn't stick with what was actually grammatically there. They tried to make it a little bit easier in English, and so they tried to make it sound like it was these unlawful actions that were stressing his soul that caused him to be tortured. But the real idea is he's torturing himself, okay, by means of all of these things going on around him. He's looking around him, like I said, and going, ooh, if only, right? Or ooh. Okay? So there's some important information here. I love us going through Peter because Peter is just chock full. Every word that he does, every sentence that we have is just chock full of all kinds of information. You got to be careful not to go too far and put something in there that isn't there. But we know from Genesis that this is there. Okay, if you read Genesis the way it was written and not with rose-colored glasses, that Lot was some kind of biblical hero, but actually read what he did, you find out that he is what? He's human, he's malfunctioning, and he's a believer, but he's not functioning properly as a believer. So we're going to get an analysis now. The analysis is including 7 and 8. Okay. Wow. Well, all the points are going to pop up all at once. So, point 1. Verse 7 starts as we expect with the conjunction and the ellipsis and if. Peter is giving us another example in the protasis of God's ability to protect the righteous while punishing the wicked. Point 2. Next, we have, quote, he rescued, comma, quote. Which is a phrase that continues to tell us that God is the one who has the power and authority to do the rescuing. So the idea is that if God hadn't chosen to do the rescuing, then Lot and his family would have been destroyed with the rest of Sodom and Gomorrah. And so Peter, by giving us this and if, and then it continues to give us the emphasis that, hey, I'm building up to a case here. I'm giving you yet another example of a horrible environment where we take care of the people that are causing the horrible environment, and we rescue the person who was in the middle of that and needed rescuing. Okay. Point 3. Next, we have the emphatic phrase, quote, righteous Lot. Remember, that's underlined, period, end quote. This emphasizes the status of Lot, colon. He was a believer. The idea of him being righteous, see, if I'd given you all of the previews of Becoming Attractions, this wouldn't have seemed so much like I'm beating a dead horse. But the idea of him being righteous is not associated with his behavior, but rather his status. He has the imputed righteousness of God. This is not, and you can underline is not, declaring that Lot was functioning properly. See, once again, this is important for us to be able to understand the rest of this passage, right? That it is status and not operation. Okay? Continue the point. I probably should have made these subpoints, but didn't. I just given you a long point. Note that when we compare this verse to verse 5, that Noah was, quote, a proclaimer of righteousness, period, end quote. Noah was a properly functioning believer who is evangelizing and teaching. Okay. I don't know how I got height as H-I-G-H-T. Anyway, okay. Noah was a properly functioning believer who was also evangelizing and teaching. In verse 5, we have operational righteousness. Here we do not. We see the word, quote, righteous, end quote, with respect to Lot. Three times in our passage, comma. But it is continuing to be used with regard to status, and in a semi-sarcastic way. And I modified it by saying semi-sarcastic. If it were hard sarcastic, Peter would certainly have the capability of making it very, very sarcastic. He was someone who was very good with that kind of language. You know, Peter was a very common man, and by this point, though, obviously he's learned an awful lot. He's refined his speech a little bit. He's not fisherman, and you know that he was when he first started. But yeah, he certainly, being a fisherman, you could imagine he probably had the vocabulary and the wherewithal to make it extremely sarcastic. But here in the Greek, it does come across as sarcasm. Yeah, you're righteous, dude. Right? Yeah, look at all these righteous things that you're doing. Right? You're living among these people and living among them, dwelling among them. Not stopping the pressure, not doing anything about it. You have the opportunity, fantastic opportunity to evangelize like Noah did. And what are you doing? You're just building your house. And we know this, and we'll get into this when we get into, here's more previews of coming attractions. When we get into Lot's behavior, okay, we know that he didn't have the confidence in God to have courage towards these men, because when the angel came to visit him, what did he do? He said, the men of the city came and said, "Hey, you've got two new guys in your house. Bring them out so we can rape them," basically, right? And what did Lot do? Lot, slam the door and say no. Lot said, "Well, how about I give you another alternative?" And he offers up his daughters, which actually, if you read the passage, what you find out is that he was actually trying to outsmart these guys, because he identifies his daughters as daughters who have not known any men. In other words, they haven't had any sexual relationships with men. So it sounds like he's off his virgin daughters. Thing was, he didn't have any virgin daughters. His daughters were married. So that goes by a lot of people's minds too. They think, how horrible is that? He's offering up his virgin daughters. No, he's trying to outsmart them and say, "Hey, I'll give you my virgin daughters." They say, "Okay." And I don't have any. Slam the door and go. Right? But anyway, he's getting them all upset. So what happens? Angels actually have to save him, rather than him standing up against the men. The angels have to pull him into his house, and then they strike the men blind. Okay. So that's what happens. So he's not in any way, shape, or form a properly functioning dude. He doesn't have any courage. He should have stood up to these men and even been a martyr if he needed to save these angels. He knows they're angels, right? And they're coming to tell him, by the way, we're going to wipe out your city, which they didn't have to do, right? And he says, "Oh, I don't think so." right? And you know what happened to his wife, right? She looks back in longingly, looks back to the city, and she gets turned into a pillar of salt, right? His son-in-laws don't come, right? His daughters come with him, but his son-in-laws say, "Nah, we're having too much of a good time. You guys go. See ya." Right? So they get taken out. But the idea is that Noah was properly functioning, was evangelizing and teaching, and in verse 5 we actually have operational righteousness, and here we don't. Okay, and so we saw the word righteous with respect to Lot 3 times in our passage, where we see it, but it's continuing to be used with regard to status and in a semi-sarcastic way. And that leaves us for point 4, but since point 4 has a couple subpoints under it, and we only have 5 minutes before the bottom of the hour, I'm going to go ahead and stop here. That'll give us the 5 minutes per song, and we'll end at the bottom of the hour instead of taking you over. Okay. Okay. So if you'll